Have you ever had your bag inspected at airport security because of your sharp metal needles? Have you worried about losing your precious projects or tools, or maybe left them at home just in case? Or worse, have you ever actually had your needles confiscated? Today I will share my step-by-step checklist to choose your projects for flying and to prepare them to minimize trouble at the airport or in the cabin. And I will also show you exactly how I applied this process when I traveled to Italy recently and I was traveling only with hand luggage. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to Passenger. If you're new here, you're very welcome, and if you're a returning viewer, thank you very much for coming back. My name is Laura and I will be your host today. This is my channel, Pass and Purse, where I talk about knitting, crocheting, and all things beautiful. As an expat living in the UK for the past 13.5 years, I have been flying fairly frequently just to see my family. On these frequent trips over the years, I have kind of developed my own strategies to minimize stress, especially at the airport, while prepping to go there and at the airport, especially during security. And this, of course, includes my knitting and my crochet projects. I am quite sure I can't be the only one who prepares and packs my project bags and all of my projects as a I often hear of people who are confused about what the rules are while flying, how to go through security, what can be brought to the cabin for what concerns especially knitting needles, but also occasionally crochet hooks. And so while I was preparing to fly to Italy last month, I actually had the idea of filming my process of packing, and so I gathered also together a little bit more information for you in this video. But first I would love to know, have you ever had any troubles bringing your crochet hooks or knitting needles through airport security or in the cabin? Let me know in the comments. First I will share my checklist and then I will share what my process looked like when I was packing for my last trip. Checklist step number 1. Check the rules both with the airport and the airline. This is a very important step for me. It's a step most people miss. Even when I see online, when people are responding to questions, lots of people don't realize that it's not just the airline or it's not just the airport. There are rules that are different. It depends. Do you want to bring your project to your cabin? Then you need to also check with your airline. Do you only want to bring your hello Loki, hello. Do you only want to bring your project in your hand luggage because you don't have maybe a whole luggage? Then it should be fine to just check it with the airport, but I would always check with the airline as well, just in case. So there's airport rules and there's airline rules. The airport rules are the ones that establish what can go through security at the airport. And then the airline decides what can be brought in the cabin and especially what can be done in the cabin. So if you like to knit or crochet while flying, then you need to check, definitely check with the airline. These are two completely different things. And I know that as a rule of thumb, airports and airlines take the rules from, there's usually an aviation authority in each country. So this aviation authority, and I'm going to share some of the research I've done. This aviation authority brings the rules of what can't be brought, but they don't necessarily go into exactly the specifics. So they say you can't bring sharp objects. What is a sharp object? So then the airport, I've noticed usually that the airport, at least in Europe, and I'm mainly talking about European rules here because these are the ones that I know best. It might be slightly different elsewhere, but I think that checking with the airport, checking with the airline, you can't go wrong. If you know that the airline authority is the one that holds all the authority there, then definitely check with the airline authority too. However, in Europe, there's lots of, is very local. So the country airline authority, I've checked the UK one and the Italian one because I very often travel to Italy because that's where I'm from, that's where my family lives. The aviation authority in both cases gives a set of rules but doesn't go into specifics. So can't bring sharp objects. But what are sharp objects? Sometimes they do, for example, with scissors, sometimes they don't. For example, with knitting needle, there is nowhere written specifically that you cannot or you can bring knitting needles. And that I've noticed that some airports then in Europe, different countries or within the same country, choose to specify if that is allowed or not. For example, in London there are 6 airports and each of them has their own website, and in each website there are slightly different rules for how a sharp object is defined, and I will show you in a second. So some airports go to much greater extent to define what is sharp and what actually classifies as sharp. They give example, they go into specifics. So actually, let's go now and have a look at these websites. Starting with London Heathrow, there is a security and baggage FAQ page, and here it does talk about sharp objects, and it specifically says you can bring knitting needles in the cabin with you. So Heathrow is openly saying that information, and it's quite actually easy to find. Now moving on to London Gatwick, the London Gatwick has a much more comprehensive list in the FAQ, so there's all sort of details and questions about the bags, what can go in, etc, etc. But then there is a specific question: can I take my knitting needles or crochet hooks through security? And it says yes, you can in your hand luggage. So it is even easier than Heathrow here. Then London Stansted, here there is a page, security London Stansted, there's lots of detail there. There's some information about what is prohibited items, how to go through check-in and security. And if you go down to the detailed information, again there's all sort of information. It is slightly more complicated to find what you need. There is no specific question about knitting needles, however there is a list of prohibited items, and here you can see that list, and if you can go through the list you will see that doesn't mention knitting needles or crochet hooks. So far the assumption is yes, I can bring them. I can't explicitly see if they're actually allowed. However, there's no more information there, so Stansted doesn't go in the specifics about knitting needles. Then I went through it all over again because I wanted to be sure I wasn't missing anything. I went back to the page with information, and yeah, so then I moved to Luton. Luton has a page about check-in and security. However, I wasn't very happy with the level of information that was in there, so I actually specifically asked for prohibited items. And the search results gave a little bit more information, so about liquids, boots, security tips, but yet I could still not find anything specifically about knitting needles. And going through more of the questions, again I couldn't find it. So I went to another section of the website about security, and I finally found this little part that says what is not allowed in my hand luggage. So in there it sends you straight into the Government UK page about hand luggage restrictions at UK airports. So they refer you straight to the aviation authority basically, and there is a specific list about, it comes in a second, there is a list of prohibited items, what is allowed and what is not allowed. So here you will see the spoon is quite interesting. I would have never thought that is any threatening, but then you can see nail clippers are allowed, tweezers are allowed, knitting needles are allowed, sewing needle is allowed, so that's specifically said. So considering that Luton sends you straight to this page, then you should confidently assume, similarly to Gatwick and Heathrow, that these type of items are allowed. I went back to the page to see if there was something else, and a little bit lower in the page I actually found the very same list. And you will see this list has literally been copied and pasted from the gov.uk website, so it has the very same kind of formatting and the very same level of information. Here we are looking at the Milan-Bergamo airport website, so we are looking at Italian airports. Here there is information about what is not allowed at security, but how to go through security, and then a little bit lower there will be a high-level list of what is not allowed. So it goes in a lot of detail about liquids, and then so here there's some information about what type of liquids can go through security, but it doesn't say anything at all about sharp objects, so here I am none the wiser. So I tried to go back, see if there was another place where I could get some information, and it wasn't an easy journey, to be fair. And actually I don't think I was able to find any more detailed information flying from Bergamo airport. Here looking at another one of Milan airports, Milano Malpensa, and here it was much easier compared to Bergamo to find immediately the information related to prohibited items in the hand luggage. So here we can see is a drop-down menu. However, the information that is on this website was kind of limited. There is a list which is clear enough, but it's not very specific. However, it is very specific about one thing that you will see there: sewing needles. As we saw, they were specifically allowed in some of the London airports, but here at Milan Malpensa they actually specifically say they are not allowed. Then I clicked on the link More Information, which brought me straight to the website of the Internazionale per l'Aviazione Civile, which is the Italian Civil Aviation Authority. And here it gives you way more detail. So it tells you about what is defined as a sharp object. And I'm sorry, this is just in Italian. I didn't think we were looking for the English. However, here I couldn't find any specific information about knitting needles. I looked at these are the items allowed in the cabin. So it does talk about type of bag with video camera, photo camera, and all these type of things. However, it doesn't really specify about sharp objects. Then I found this document about the Air Italy airline, which is one of the main airlines in Italy, and there was a specific document about all the rules and regulations about flying with Air Italy, and I went straight to the page where they talk about prohibited items. And here you will see that they specifically mention that it is prohibited to bring in the cabin knitting needles. You will see that in this list. And so be aware that if you fly Air Italy, in theory, knitted needles are not allowed in the cabin. So just remember that. Then after looking at Air Italy, then I went back and looked at British Airways for the UK. And here there's a whole page which details what is restricted or prohibited to be brought in the cabin. So there's lots of information about liquids, batteries, electric and electronic devices, etc., etc. And then under other restricted items, there is something about prohibited or controlled items. There's something specifically about sharp objects. So it doesn't mention knitting needles under prohibited sharp objects. However, it does specifically say that you can take knitting needles and crochet hooks. So as you see, British Airways has a completely opposite stance to Air Italy about knitting needles. Then I also had a look at the Ryanair website. Under permitted items, it didn't specify anything about knitting needles, so they're not explicitly said to be allowed. But they are not strictly prohibited either, so I couldn't find them in this list. You can go and check on the website yourself. It does specifically list a whole set of sharp objects, and if you go and read through them, none of them are knitting needles or crochet hooks. It doesn't mention sewing needles either. It mentioned scissors, but as we know, only scissors that are bigger than 6 centimeters are not allowed. And then also I'll had a look at workman tools just in case they classify them under that. They don't, so there's no mention there. So Ryanair is a little bit ambiguous there, but you can maybe make a bet about it. Just to be extra sure, I thought I'd ask the chat. As you might expect, the information from the chatbot wasn't particularly relevant, so it kept sending me back to information I've already found elsewhere in the website. I asked repeatedly different questions, more specifically, and I was always sent back to the same type of information. And after a while, I kind of somehow gave up. As you can see here, you can try it yourself if maybe you're more lucky than me. At some point, I even asked if I could speak with someone on the chat just to see if a human could actually maybe understand my question better. But at that point, I was asked if I needed to speak with support, and I didn't feel like I needed support. I just wanted an answer to a simple question I had. So at that point, I just gave up. Yeah, Ryanair is a bit ambiguous there. Be careful. Then, of course, when I fly from the same airport twice, I very often fly from London, so I know at least some of the airports from London. I know the rules by now, so I don't check anymore. But if I fly with a different airline, I always check what the rules of the airline for the cabin are. And of course, if I'm going somewhere new, I'm definitely gonna check if I plan to bring my knitting or crochet with me. Then there are some ways that we can minimize the risk even beyond that. And we're going to look at them soon. So to summarize, always check or refresh your memory on what the airport rules are. Always check what the airline rules are for the cabin. But always remember that despite what the website says, even if you've spoken with someone on the phone, even if you have an email, always remember that the final decision is up to the officer at security, at least for the things that go through security. And in the cabin is with the crew, the flying crew from the airline. So can be that in that particular time, that particular officer, maybe because of other reasons of which we do not know about, there might have been other threats that they know of, that the general public doesn't know of earlier that week or earlier that day even. So for them, in that particular moment, having a sharp 3mm Chaogu, very sharp metal needle in a plane is a bit dangerous. So they're going to decide you cannot bring it. So remember that. Always be respectful with their decision. They definitely have the right. What I usually do, I usually take a screenshot of the website. For example, Heathrow Airport says specifically that you can bring knitting needle through security. So I always take a screenshot of that. And if the security officer is not sure, I can show them that. If then, even in front of the evidence, they decide that they don't like me to bring my needles through security, there's nothing I can do about it. I've heard of people who, so I'm gonna show you what I do about that actually in a second, because there are ways to minimize losing your precious Chaogu needles, or in my case, I've got lantern moons that are ebony, they're really expensive, so I don't want to lose those. So there are ways to minimize that risk. But the same as for the security officer, the same goes for the flight attendants. So if you're on a flight and you decide to knit or crochet, but I think this mainly applies to knitting, but you never know. And then maybe there's lots of turbulence. So maybe with severe turbulence, the flight attendant might ask you to put your tools away because it's a hazard to have something so sharp in a turbulence. That makes sense, right? Or maybe someone feels threatened by them and they ask the flight attendant to ask you to put them away, there's nothing you can do. Just smile and put them away. And now we go a little bit deeper in how to minimize the risk of losing our good needles, or our good tools. And this goes into checklist step number two, and this is choosing the right project. This step is particularly relevant if you want to craft while you are in the cabin, while you are flying. Before packing, what I usually do is think about the project itself. Is it portable? Is it simple enough? Is it the right project that can be worked in tight spaces? For example, a sock might be a perfectly simple and portable project, right? It is small, it's very mindless, especially if it's just a vanilla sock. However, if you love to do socks with double pointing needles like I do, maybe this is not the best choice. There's way too many needles, too many points going on there. What if the needle falls on the floor? That's not great, is it? So if you like to bring a sock, maybe then think about prefer short circulars instead of DPNs. Same really goes for the magic circle. If you like to knit socks on the magic circle, maybe don't do it on the plane, because I think there's a little bit too much movement you need to do. There's the big loop. If the flight is busy, is crowded, maybe you have someone plus size next to you, you never know, is a little bit too much. So something that is small, portable, that can be easily done without you having to adjust and move too much. Same goes for something that is very big, like maybe don't bring that maxi blanket or afghan. Maybe don't bring the poncho for your aunt. I definitely wouldn't bring it in the cabin, or the maxi chunky jumper. But also maybe avoid color work, lace, cables, because you have the extra cable needle. So, or anything like color work and lace that requires maybe a chart. So something for which maybe you have to take out a book or your tablet, or maybe a piece of paper. And again, the space is tight, and where are you gonna put all those things? Are you even gonna be comfortable? If you are comfortable, are your fellow passengers comfortable? So I think this is good to consider. And also this helps you minimize the risk that someone complains and asks you to put your project away. So of course, these problems, if you have checked luggage, just leave this project in your checked luggage and keep the easier one for your flight. Now we are going to move to checklist step number 3, tools and safety considerations. This is where the most stress can happen, so let's go through it carefully. And especially be very careful with this step if the airport website doesn't actually openly specify, like Heathrow Airport, that knitting needles are indeed allowed. So look at your knitting needles. Are they sharp metal needles? Do they have a metal cable? Are they long straight needles? So maybe avoid the very sharp ones. In general, I would actually say, if you can, avoid bringing through security metal needles. Like I would never bring my Chaogu through there, my Haya through there. No, they're too sharp. The metal is really proper steel. They look quite scary, to be honest, especially the thinner ones. So yes, I wouldn't bring those through, especially if it is not specified. If it is specified, you can risk it, but be mindful, it's a risk. But if it's not specified, absolutely not. So prefer bamboo, wood, or acrylic for these type of flights. If you use interchangeables, many people actually suggest to remove the tips, put your stoppers in, and put your tips into a pencil case together with your other pens and pencils, whatever you have in there. And especially if they're wood, they're just gonna look like any pencil. So if this is something you want to do, why not? Of course, again, if they're metal and they are in a pencil case, that I think that doesn't look great. Crochet hooks in general, really crochet hooks are okay. I would personally avoid bringing maybe the micro crochet hooks, the very, very thin ones that are quite sharp, those ones, and they're always metal, so maybe don't do that. Or so wouldn't really do micro crochet on the plane, but I know some people do it on the bus, so why not? But maybe again, if it's not specified, maybe leave them at home for this time, bring something else where you can use maybe a less sharp hook, a bigger hook. But crochet is usually fine. But of course, the consideration about big projects applies for crochet too. So maybe squares, like for my Battenberg blanket, those are perfect for flying because they're tiny squares. You don't disturb anyone with those. So yeah, think about that too. Scissors. So the scissors, it is specified now that you can bring scissors that are 6 centimeter and less. So the blade needs to be maximum 6 centimeter. However, I've noticed that again, here there are different rules depending on the country. I've seen that they specify you can use scissors up to 6 centimeter with rounded tips. So that kind of means like paper scissors, right? Like the children's scissors, not our sharp embroidery scissors. So I think there's a little bit of ambiguity. Where there is ambiguity, there is risk. So again, don't bring your good scissors, your expensive scissors, definitely not, or scissors that mean a lot for you. Like your grandmother gave you those scissors when she taught you how to knit when you were 5. Yeah, maybe don't bring those. I never had any, I always bring my scissors since they said it is allowed. I never had any problems, no one ever questioned them, and they're the usual, I don't have them here, but they're usual stork, that one. The thing is, I don't mind losing my scissors because they're just cheap scissors, so I wouldn't mind losing them. That's why I always bring them, but I would be totally fine if they took them away. For those website, in those cases where they specify they need to be rounded, maybe if you don't want to lose your embroidery scissors, then maybe bring some, yeah, go into a shop and just buy the school kids paper scissors. Other alternatives can also be those mini scissors that I purchased just on Saturday at my they're part of my haul at the Unravel Festival. If you haven't watched it, I will link it below, and please go and have a look so you will know what I'm talking about. Those I wouldn't think they would do any problems because the blade is literally less than half a centimeter. So those would be an option. Or I've always used nail clippers. Those are always allowed. And yes, it's not the best cut. So again, it depends. If it's not too thick what you have. With wool, it works well, but mine is like 4-ply sock yarn. Never had a problem with it. It's not the best cut. So if you don't like your wool to not be perfectly cut, maybe they're not the best choice, but they're an option. Or some people talk about just using dental floss. You bring your dental floss with you, which is always allowed, and it always has that tiny little blade. Again, that would work probably with thinner yarn. I'm not sure it would work with slightly thicker yarn, or if you're working with, well, I wouldn't bring it on a plane anyway, but would definitely not work with that t-shirt yarn with which you make baskets. So again, depending what are your needs, think about it. Bring what is best for you. Just never bring anything that you're not prepared to lose. Sewing needles. These actually I had a surprise because I never had a problem with sewing needles. I usually bring them with me. Also, I bring the ones that you use for knitting or crocheting. So it's the usual tapestry needle. So it's fairly big, fairly blunt. So I think that's why I never had any problem. However, I've seen, I think it was it Italian airport? Some airport you will have seen that specifically say that you can't actually bring sewing needles, and that absolutely was a surprise for me, but it is there. So again, in that case, actually you might have a problem with the sewing needle. If you get the stricter person who more strictly applies the rules, when you go through Italian airport security in Milan, like I think it was there that I saw it, you might lose your sewing needles. Again, it's not the end of the world for me. I can find more. But if you're not ready to lose yours because you are afraid you will never find that one, or maybe it has taken a certain shape that really goes with your hand, I don't know, then there are lots of options there. I know there are some cheap plastic ones. I know that maybe I have an aluminium one, which is definitely blunt and less scary. It doesn't even look like a sewing needle. I know that, I think, is it Pony? Prim. I think Prim have made a set of black and white kind of plastic acrylic ones that looks actually quite good, and that is plastic. I wouldn't think that even if they don't like you bringing needles, I'm pretty sure they mean metal sewing needles. So I would be pretty sure that any acrylic or plastic needles, even wood, if they still exist, they would be allowed. So have a little thought there if you're flying in some places. So for what concerns the safety of the tools, I also have another couple of tips. For example, bring needle stoppers on your needles. So I do have those tulip silicone ones. They make them look way less threatening. I know that through security they can still see that it's sharp inside there, but they can see you've actually gone to lengths to minimize the risk of people getting even accidentally poked with your needle. So I think that is something that I always do, and of course it also protects your own needles in your, maybe if you have a bag that is a bit full, and protects if they search your bag, you cannot, most airport they don't allow you to touch your bag. You just have to wait, and then the security officer does it. And you don't want them to hurt themselves with your needles. So I think it's always a good idea to put the stoppers on there. And also, if you have, otherwise there are also those bags, well, not bags, like DPN holders that work. I always use them for circular needles too, just put them there in there, and those also hold them really well. So I think that's another idea. And then also bring a project bag for each of your projects and bring them all together in the same bag. It doesn't have to be a fancy project bag or anything. A tote bag can work, anything you have. Never ever bring a tool. I know I already said it, I will repeat it. Never bring something that you're not prepared to lose. Any tools that you bring there, even if they are allowed, you might risk to lose it. So just in case, please don't bring your super expensive set. Bring the other cheaper ones. I know it's not the same. You will see in my video, I actually replaced the needles on my poncho because I wasn't prepared to lose my lantern moons, not even just the cable. So I moved them. I had a pair of Prims. They have different tips, they have different feel, but they still do the job. It's still the same size, so it's fine. It's fine. So don't risk it. Don't risk it. Follow the rules, but especially where the rules are ambiguous, don't risk it. However, I've read that some crafters suggest bringing an envelope that with your address that already has the paid tariff on it. And in the worst case, if they want to take your needles away, take the needles, put them in the envelope, and ask them if you can just go back to the airport to just post it. Usually there are post boxes there. Of course, this I've never done it myself. As I said, I never actually had any problems myself, but also I don't always actually bring projects with me apart from my little pouch, which you will see, you will have seen when I was going to the summer wolf fair. I will actually link that below. Maybe I will put a playlist so I can list to both Unravel and Summer Wolf Fair, so that you will also see my little pouch with my Battenberg blanket squares, which is really this tiny, that I bring everywhere. That's the only one that I always bring on the plane. Other projects I don't necessarily do because I often fly with the luggage in the hold, so I put most of my projects in there. The times that I have flown with my projects, I never had any problems. But I've heard of people who've had it, so I believe it. And actually, anecdotally, once I was flying from Rimini airport, which is on the Adriatic Sea in Italy. And I did ask the lady that I think it's a purely Ryanair airport. And my partner Yanni, he had some like work tools in his bag, and they asked him to leave them behind. And I said, well, if you had to leave those, then those are not as sharp as my needles. So would I have to leave behind the knitting needles, which I didn't have that time? It's just a weekend, I didn't bring them. And they said, and the lady that was there told me, yes, I wouldn't allow you to go through with knitting needles. So if you go to Riccione Airport, you might have problems. So yeah, try and minimize them following my checklist. And now we move on to the checklist step number 4. Pack your project properly. I know we've already touched some of these, but as a rule, how you pack really makes a big difference. So needle stoppers, project bag, keep it all together, make it look less threatening, make it look like you know what you're doing. This is just your hobby, is nothing more than that. Do not bring your whole collection of needles, especially if metal, even if interchangeables. I wouldn't bring my full pouch of interchangeable needles in the hand luggage. I would put it in the hold if I had to bring it with me. Yeah, I might have risked it once, but because I was flying from the 2 airports, Heathrow and Milan, that are the 2 airports where I always fly, and I know also because it's specified on the website, so I know that it was very unlikely that I would have any trouble. The possibility is never zero, but I risked it, but I wouldn't really risk again. It's not worth it, for me at least. Checklist step number 5, in cabin comfort. Again, we kind of touched this step a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper into that. Once you're on board, think about comfort. So keep your bag with your project if you know you will want to use it during the flight. Don't put it in the overhead locker. Keep it at your feet if you can. The bag, as I said, keep it small, so it should be small enough to be in the bag at your feet, so that you don't have to, fuss around too much to get your project. You can get to it easily and quickly, which is what we usually want. Then be ready to put your project away if you're asked by the flight attendant or by any other passengers. Of course, their feeling of safety is as valid as your feeling of wanting to have your craft with you while you're flying. So we need to compromise a little bit. So I would always recommend to just do as they ask. And then, very important, if you, like me, are not a great flyer, I know I fly very often, but I'd rather keep myself occupied while I'm on the plane. So always think about backup entertainment. So if you need to have entertainment of your flight, don't just bring your knitting. Bring some books, bring your Kindle, bring your audiobooks, bring maybe if you have a tablet, bring your tablet so that you can watch a series, download series and movies ahead of time. If the flight is long and maybe they don't have on-air entertainment, or you have to pay for it. So if you have to put your project away, you have something else, crossword puzzles, anything. So do not forget this step. It's important to have a backup plan. So again, less stress makes traveling easier. And finally, checklist step number 6. Have a backup plan for your projects. This is also very important, again, for your peace of mind. For example, add a lifeline to your project if it's needed, just in case. So if you have to take your needles off, I've read horror stories of people who had to do that. So if it happens to you, have a lifeline so you don't risk to have it to rip back half of your work. Then carry a spare set of needles in the hole, maybe your good needles if you want to have them with you, if possible. Of course, like when I was flying in August, I didn't have a bag in the hole, so I couldn't do that. I had to have everything in the hand luggage. But if you can, of course, don't forget this step. And very important, don't never assume that because it worked for your friend or for your neighbor or someone it will work for you. So or even for yourself last time, if it worked for you last time, don't assume that it's gonna be the same this time or that it's gonna be the same at a different airport. Different airports can have different rules, but even different times at the same airport, something might have changed, and we as a general public will not know about it. So never assume that because it was like that, it will always be the same, because it will most probably not be the same. So as I said, I never had any problems flying to and from Italy many times in these 13 and a half years, but also I have developed this process so I can keep my peace of mind. I definitely don't have to worry or stress about my needles, my projects, my tools, my supplies, nothing. I don't have to worry about it, and having this little prep, being prepared and knowing what I am going through and what is my backup plan, this really helps me have peace of mind, helps keeping me more relaxed as a slightly nervous flyer, as I mentioned. But now let's go and have a look at what I packed for Italy and how I did it. Bringing my poncho with sleeve with me. So I am currently doing the sleeve, and it has quite a long cable, which might be worrisome. However, I know it's not going to be a problem flying there because I'm flying British Airways, and British Airways have it on their website that you are allowed to knit even on the plane. And I know the Heathrow Airport also have it on their website that you can bring knitting needles through security. So first thing, just to be sure that they don't look too scary, I would actually check that if I have maybe needles that are not metal. I usually don't tend to use needles that are metal, only if I'm using really lace, then I do like to use chalgu or needles like that, or like the Adi ones, the metal ones that are nice and sharp. But I'm not knitting lace. I'm using, actually these are my ebony lantern moon. Well, this I think is, you can't really see, but yeah, so this is ebony, is wood, is ebony. They're quite a bit sharp, however it's still wood. They shouldn't look too scary. The cord is metal, that might be deemed scary. I would normally not bring actually my expensive needles on a flight, but I'm quite confident with British Airways. It might be a different case when I fly back, because I'm flying back Ryanair. I don't fly Ryanair as much, and Ryanair is a little bit more ambiguous, and I am flying from Milan Bergamo, and actually I don't know the airport much. I am gonna check now. I'm gonna actually have a look, and I usually I don't like to change needles. I'm gonna check if I have a 3.5 circular needles for the other ones, and I am gonna put it in this nice and big bag from the Woolly Tango that I purchased at the Summer Wool Fair, because this is probably one of the biggest bags that I have at the moment. I have another one that is probably this same size, but it is busy and I do not fancy swapping projects today. So yeah, this is definitely gonna comfortably fit in here. I found these nice plastic, with the plastic cord, small circumference. I think these are 40 centimeter cord, but they are long enough to do comfortably a magic circle with my sleeve, which is just 66 stitches. These are Prim Ergonomics, I think. So they are definitely non-threatening tip, non-threatening cord, as it's fairly short and it's plastic. And I think this should actually be 3.5. Sorry, it's a bit difficult with just two hands to do this. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So 3.5 millimeter definitely doesn't go in the 3.25. 5. No. Perfect. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna swap the stitches on this just to be on the safe side. Not that much today, flying British Airways from Heathrow, but on Sunday when I will be coming back flying Ryanair from Milan Bergamo. So I have actually moved the stitches. These really shouldn't create any problems at all, even with Ryanair. I am actually quite happy. It's quite nicely in there, and I am gonna add some small extras just in case. One project ready. So here I have a 3mm hook. This is actually very, what is it? Yeah, non-threatening looking. It's not even a sharp one. This is cotton. Actually, I think I'm gonna work as much with them, so I think I'm just gonna, to keep it light, and I think I'm just gonna leave some of the cotton here, just having the one that I'm using, as you see, still have a lot, and one extra one just in case, just for safe measure. So this is nice and small. I'm gonna leave it in here, it doesn't need another project bag. So this is also done. Then the last one is gonna be my zombie. So here we do have a little bit of different yarns that I need to bring. So we need to bring the green, the other green, the purple, the blue, which is the one that is currently attached, and the leg. I have the crochet hook. This is a slightly sharper one. This is actually my favorite type. This is prim. I think this is prim and soft touch, and it is a inline hook, which is my preferred. And as you can see, the head is kind of sharpish for a crochet hook, but I'm not worried about it. It's not a small crochet hook, so it's not that sharp. So this is gonna be fine even with Ryanair. And in the worst case, I'm coming back home. I will have others here. This is a fairly inexpensive one. It's just a couple of pounds, I think. So I can always replace it coming back in the worst case scenario. So I think this is important. Just plan ahead, thinking what is the worst case scenario. Coming back is slightly less worse. Going there is a little bit more worrisome because you might not be able to complete your work while you are away. So now I'm gonna grab a project bag for this. So I'm gonna use for this, it's not super big, but it should be big enough. This is Liberty fabric. It's lovely, I love it. Liberty fabric with yellow contrast, these pretty tulip drawstrings, yellow inside, boxed bottom, and there's actually a matching lavender pouch together. And this, it's a Crafty Clegs Creations bag with Liberty fabric. Should fit just about. This is what I am gonna pack in my bag. One last thing that I need to add, little pouch where I keep my notiony bits. So here I have, this is to put stitches on hole. Here I have my darning tapestry needles. I need to clean it up a little bit. I have, this is my Saju that I bought at Loops London fabric tape. Some stitch markers. I keep the smaller things here. These are actually, it's actually some tulip needle stopper, my scissors, and then this Some more stitch markers. This is to fix mistakes. It's from a knitting machine and it works great. And yeah, then I have a cable needle, which, well, and then I have, this is a crochet. What size is it? 3.5. This can even be useful in case of emergency, which doubles up as a knitting needle, and crochet hook, which is always useful also for fixing things. So yeah, I am not worried about the scissors because scissors are allowed and these are well below the allowance. And if they got crazy and decided that suddenly they don't want any scissors on the flight, I'm fine with this. I don't mind. They are inexpensive scissors. I can replace them very easily. So yeah, this is how I pack my projects for my hand luggage for flying. So that's my full checklist on how I prepare to fly, how I prepare my projects, and how I actually did last time I traveled without hold luggage. So I would love to know, have you ever had any problems? Do you have a favorite project like me that you bring with you when you fly? Please share this with me in the comments. I'm really curious to know. And as I mentioned earlier, I shared my most portable project that I always bring with me when I'm traveling anywhere, train, car, flight, anywhere. I have it with me, and I shared it in my Summer Wool Festival vlog. So this will appear here. You will be able to click from here. Or if you want to see my haul from my Unravel Festival, where I actually purchased a very, very, very tiny and portable pair of scissors that I am pretty sure will always be allowed with on any flights and through any security, click on the other video. If you like this video, please don't forget to like it, comment, and please consider subscribing because it really helps my little channel to grow. Thank you very much for watching, for staying with me until now, and see you next time. Bye bye. Today I will share my so there's airport rules and airline rules. Bless you, Loki.